Greetings and welcome once again to LegalizeFreedom.com. I'm your host Greg Moffitt, and today I'd like to present the latest episode of my TV and movie review series, Hauntology Dystopia. Now today we're going to be looking at essentially one item, but it's got several dimensions, three in fact, visual, but also literary and audio. Now the item in question today is a 2020 movie called Last and First Men. Now this is based on the 1930 science fiction classic by Olaf Stapledon of the same name. Last and First Men, a story of the far and near future. Now, what we're looking at here, as you can see, is a Digipack CD. The film is by an Icelandic composer, Jóhannsson, sadly no longer with us. And I first heard some of the score for this movie online. Didn't realize there was actually a movie, and I wanted to get the music itself just to have, so I purchased this CD, and then with it came as a bonus disc the DVD, Blu-ray actually, of his movie Last and First Men, a relatively short film. So what I've got here is my original CD with the bonus Blu-ray. A standalone DVD Blu-ray version of the film is available should you wish to get that, and you'll get the music on there anyway. Now I was struck by Jóhannsson's compositions, just staggering music really at the end of the day. And that's just stumbled upon it on YouTube, and that was my introduction to somebody whose, his work has enriched my life greatly in the meantime. But we're here today primarily to talk about the movie, obviously, because that's the TV and movie review series. So Jóhannsson, as I say, primarily known as a composer, and Last and First Men is his only feature, if you want to call it that. He did make a short film in 2014 called The End of Summer, which is very atmospheric, and it kind of hints at where he might go with his visualization of Last and First Men. Now, as a movie, I would say this is very much abstract, late night kind of vibes film. It's not a straightforward narrative. There's no action in it. Visually, it consists mostly of, as I say, a lot of abstract cinematography accompanied by his music, and a narration by the actress, it should be actor we have to say these days, Tilda Swinton, who you might have known from the Narnia movies. And she's now narrating parts of the text from the novel, I say, over the music and the visuals. And I've really never seen anything quite like it. I mean, the feeling I got from it was like I got back in the 80s watching movies by Jean-Luc Godard, or movies like Stalker, just, overwhelming, immersive visual and thought space, immersions. It's very difficult to characterize. It's just really not filmmaking at the level where it mostly has been throughout the history of cinema. Just something different, taking the medium to a different level. So the movie itself is concerned with, I should say that the story of the book it's one of the most staggering science fiction stories ever conceived and written, and it concerns human beings from the very far future finding themselves in existential danger, basically looking at the end of the human race for sort of astronomical, cosmological reasons, whether the death of the sun or whatever it happens to be. Just this idea that there's an ultimate end to human life in this solar system, that it has a vast expanse, but at some point it will end. I think we all know that, but we don't think about it because in our terms it's so far away. And the book, and therefore the story overall, including in the movie version, and that invoked by the soundtrack, is told from the perspective of the last men. I think it's the 18th human species that have evolved over this 2 billion year period. And they are psychically reaching back in time to get into the mind of the narrator of the story. And it's like the form of a channeled book almost. The narrator is just writing down verbatim what is coming to him, as it turns out, from the humans of the very, very far future. And they are saying, we're looking at the end of the human race, and we can help you as past humanity, and we need your help. The visuals themselves in the film are actually, they're filmed in the former Yugoslavia, which at the time when the constructions that are featured in the movie were made was part of the Soviet Union. And these are essentially war memorials. They're called spomeniks, S-P-O-M-E-N-I-K-S. If you look that up online, you'll find out what these are. And Jóhannsson's use of them in the film is incredibly evocative, because if you come to this film not knowing anything about these structures, then most of them could plausibly be on another planet. They really have an otherworldly, unearthly feel to them. And so he identified them. I was really interested in these structures prior to this, by the way, but he identified them correctly as something almost not of this world. And it will be if you think about in terms of how we as a contemporary culture think about megalithic structures and things like the pyramids and Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and whatnot, and we're trying to figure out what they were for and why the people at that time did what they did. I do wonder about, in the far future, what humans, if we make it, will think of the constructions of our time, including these spomeniks, should any of them survive. Most of them are made from moulded concrete and steel, steel framework, so they may well do survive for a long time, that is. Excuse me, I'm just consulting my notes here. So some of the concepts in the story, the novel, but also reflected in the movie, are the idea of mental powers. So obviously these future humans are reaching back into the past, speaking to, psychically, mentally speaking to, the humans actually of our age, that they were considered to be the first men. So, but the use of the word men just being of its time, to say the novel came out in 1930. So we're the first human species. There are 18 in total before the story probably comes to an end. And so the idea is that there's powers beyond the five senses, beyond the physical body. So not only in the novel, in the story, do we see the use of telepathy between various human species, and the importance of a hive mind, actually, which is something that many science fiction authors have speculated about. That's something, as in the past, we of our own species, we consider that the consciousness of humans was more unified and more as one, and it became more rarefied and individualized, necessarily so, in the modern age, with some advantages and many disadvantages, that in the future there might be more of a collective consciousness once again, with each individual experiencing what all the other individuals do, knowing what all the other individuals do. To me, and to many of you, this might sound actually terrifying, but that was part of our past, and it may indeed be part of our future. And I think it's the colossal time scale of Last and First Men as a story that's the most mind-blowing, 2 billion years. Here we are in our current age, in the first quarter of the 21st century, freaking out about political, social, economic woes, and thinking that you know, either we're it or we're shit, whatever it happens to be. And if we start to think about the scale of, you know, the story sets out, I think it really, it might freak some people out. I think it really puts us in our place and reminds us that you know, we're, you know, our current contemporary age is just a flash in the broader story of humanity. And we don't really know what the distant past of humanity is. I'm certainly with Michael Cremo and other similar writers on this. I think there's been humans on the earth much, much longer than accepted history presents us with. But I find it almost heartening to think about the human story on this scale, because people talk about the end of the world, you know, all the time, and whatever that happens to be. Even if there was a global nuclear war, it's not the end of the world. It might be the end of the human race and a lot of other species on the planet. It's not the end of the earth. So, but that's the hubris, that reflects the hubris and, you know, of contemporary materialistic, technological culture. There's some key concepts which interest me greatly and come up again and again in my work that are featured in the story. When we think about evolution, in Last and First Men, we hear about human beings that spend most of their time in water because the planet they're living on, initially the Earth in the story, but they do move, spending most of their time in water, so they adapt to it. Think about that imaginative but rather awful movie from a few years ago, Waterworld, where some of the characters begin to develop gills, and this has some resonance with, you know, actual research on human evolution and deep history, the aquatic ape theory. If you're interested in that, if you go to legalizefreedom.com and just into the search box at the top of the homepage, enter our dolphin ancestors, you'll find a show that I did based around aquatic ape theory. The idea that human history, we're basically not from the apes. We have a very, very different evolutionary trajectory. In terms of psychic powers and time, the nature of time, I've spoken and written a lot about this. The idea, if we take from Last and First Men, that the last men can reach back in time into the minds of us, the first men, we, then the past is not gone, actually. And this idea about the nature of time, I find appeals to me greatly in terms of interpreting reality, that there is only the present moment, and that the past and the present and the future are just ways, and time itself, linear time, is just a way that we have of interpreting events as we see them. So events appear to happen, then they're gone. This event we're having now, I'm talking to you, is now, and something else is going to happen tomorrow. And the stuff that happened yesterday is gone. The stuff that happens tomorrow is yet to come. When tomorrow comes, what's happening now between you and I will be gone. But the idea is that all of that is accessible. So past, present, and future is all just one thing in eternal now. It's just that the past events are not on the surface of reality. It's like they've gone back. If you think in terms of water, they're no longer bubbling on the surface. They've gone underneath that. So the dinosaurs, Hitler, all of that is still here, but it's just not on the surface of reality. And that what will unfold in future is already here, but it's just not visible yet in whatever way you want to interpret that. So, and the inference then with Last and First Men, in the way that the last men are appealing to the first men for help, is that the past can affect the future. If you look into quantum mechanics and the nature of time, you can see this experimentally borne out in future events, what lies in the future, seemingly having the ability to affect past events and change them. It's mind warping, I realize that, but it's something that and bear in mind, this was written in 1930. Arthur C. Clarke, the celebrated science fiction author, considered to be one of the great pioneers of the genre, he said that Olaf Stapledon's novels Last and First Men, and the one that followed it, Star Maker, that nothing fired his imagination more than these books, and I can see why. Now, in terms of science fiction history, I was reminded when I was reading Last and First Men of a number of novels I'd read before that very strongly came up, which you might care to have a look at, none of which have been filmed, but they would make great movies. One is A Canticle for Leibowitz. This is another celebrated science fiction classic set in the wake of a global nuclear war, and that spans thousands of years. And that's essentially about, it's set in a religious context, but it's essentially about knowledge, sacred knowledge, essential human knowledge and culture being preserved over vast expanses of time, and how information can be warped and changed, particularly in a religious context. And this is another thing that I think we live with today, is that, you know, if we take modern contemporary Abrahamic religions, that these represent something from the distant past, but it's been changed and warped and has lost a lot of its meaning and resonance. So what we're seeing now acted out in the world in many ways negatively is just a shell of something that once had meaning. Another one is the novel Galapagos by Kurt Vonnegut. Again, that's dealing with human evolution over vast amounts of time, and that, interestingly, that after a global economic collapse, it actually sees human beings evolve into semi-aquatic creatures once again over a long period of time. Galapagos referring to, you know, that famous island, which is a huge place in evolutionary history, about what can happen to species when they're cut off, when they're living in a very small isolated area and they're cut off from the wider evolution on the planet. I mentioned Michael Cremo before. You have great resonance with his work about the sheer extent of human history. If we've got 2 billion years ahead of us, how many million do we have behind us potentially? And this also invokes the idea of you know, the Atlantis myth, or the Atlantis storyline, that some great catastrophe befell an advanced civilization in humanity's past, beyond which, in terms of that timeline, whether that be post the last ice age or pre the last ice age, we can say very little about that. But it again gets us thinking about the idea that pre-ice age, if we can say almost nothing about human history, how much of it was there? You know, who knows? Will we ever know? I was reminded of the movie Planet of the Apes, again, just in terms of how human fortunes can fluctuate, and we dominate the planet in some ways at the minute. But that may not be the case. And in Last and First Men, you see tremendous periods of not only stagnation, I mean, hundreds of thousands of years where nothing much is going on, and humans are living in a sort of medieval degradation that just goes on for millennia, you know, almost incomprehensible to us. And at times we're under pressure of extinction events. You know, that happens again and again. And the idea presented in the book is that these Renaissance periods or golden ages are actually very brief in human history, and those who live through them are rare indeed. Makes us think about where we find ourselves now and where we've been over the last, you know, 20,000 years or maybe 15,000 years of human history that we can say something meaningful about. I'm also reminded of, in terms of impending doom, in Last and First Men, the 18 species of humans, when they're looking at their extinction and when they feel that there's nothing more they can do to avoid it, the sort of stoicism, there's a tension between stoicism and how can we best meet our fate and live well to the end, in a contemplative and meditative way, you know, a good death, or do we just go for a hedonistic orgy? Certainly the latter does not appeal to me. And there's a novel and a film called On the Beach, which is again about the Earth in the aftermath of a nuclear war. And that's about the northern hemisphere being almost destroyed completely in this nuclear conflagration, and the denizens of the southern hemisphere waiting for the nuclear fallout to gradually make its way all the way down to Antarctica, wiping out the rest of life. And they've got time, perhaps too much time, to contemplate this, and it's how they deal with their impending extinction. And there's another film called Melancholia from 2011, which is just one of the most incredible films I've ever seen. I'll just leave you with the title, Melancholia. If you haven't seen it, watch it. There's a great chat between my former guests, Thomas Sheridan and Neil MacDonald. They did a series of movie talks a few years ago. So if you can put in their names and Melancholia, you should be able to find it on YouTube. But they provide a really interesting discussion on a film that I have yet to review on the channel. One of the last things that the last men do to try and preserve the race is to basically send out spores, genetic material, into the beyond the solar system, which is due to be wiped out, in the hope that some of this material might take root, might seed itself on another planet somewhere else. And it's a kind of a forlorn hope, but it's all they can do. What this made me think about was, like, you know, the idea presented, say, in Prometheus, the movie and the Alien franchise, or in Francis Crick's panspermia theory. We don't know where life on Earth began. We cannot say. Don't listen to any of the theories. They're not proven, they're not established. We do not know. But there exists the idea that life came to Earth from some other part of the solar system or the galaxy. Now, that doesn't solve the problem of the origin of life. It just bats it down the road a little bit. But it's one way that life on Earth could have started. And one thing that's emphasized again and again in the ripples of human history told in Last and First Men is preserved the idea of cyclical time, which is one that comes up in our social and cultural anthropological history again and again, that we go through cycles of iron ages and golden ages, and round we go. But it is finite, so it doesn't go on forever. And I think that's one of the things that's most staggering to contemplate at the end of Last and First Men. I think the story presented in the book, the thought piece that is the movie, is that at some point, all of this will come to an end. But it is, I mentioned the phrase just a flash before, this is just a flash in the history of the cosmos, the evolution of the cosmos. Something else existed before we did, before the solar system did, for unimaginable spans of time into deep history. And for the time being, beyond the solar system, whatever happens, something extends into the almost unimaginable future, whatever life looks like, whatever evolution is, and whatever meaning and purpose any of that has. And Stapledon leaves us, and it's presented in the dialogue at the end of the movie, with the idea that we are starseed. What stars create, the sun is essential for life on Earth, and if there is life on any other planets in the solar system, what stars create, stars destroy. And I'll leave you with the to find out about the ending of the story, because it's quite unexpected. The accepted theory, cosmological theory, astronomical, is that one day our sun will go supernova, the way many stars do, expand, make life on Earth unbearable, everything will be burnt up, and the sun will eventually explode, wiping out everything in the solar system. Not in the galaxy, just this little bit of the galaxy that is our solar system. And what happens after that? Who knows? We won't be around to see it. Or maybe we will, to observe from some non-material afterlife perspective. But in any event, so today, I've been talking about Last and First Men, based on the 1930 novel by Olaf Stapledon, Soundtrack and Blu-ray package here, filmed by Jóhannsson, music and visuals, quite otherworldly, unearthly, magical, and I've had so much enjoyment out of this man's work. I mentioned earlier, sadly no longer with us. The film was released in 2020, but sadly Jóhann passed away in 2018 at a relatively young age. So, until next time, I'm your host, Greg Moffitt, and you've been watching LegalizeFreedom.com.
LegalizeFreedom.com